Humanity Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Richard Acritelli, and on today's episode of The Fog of War and Humanity here on HMTV, my special guest to the left of me is Jeff Brett from King Quality. Will join me for a conversation about his efforts to make this world into a better place. Today, we have one of the most positive citizens and business leaders that you will ever meet. Jeff, please tell me where you grew up and what were your interests as a kid.
Thank you. I appreciate the intro, and thank you for having me, Rich. I grew up in Port Jefferson, third generation Port Jeff, and I still live there, and I love it. And, you know, as a kid growing up, my dad was a oil and heating guy in air conditioning, and I loved sports. I didn't love school as much, but I loved sports, and my main was wrestling and you know, also football. I was captain of our wrestling team. We had great years. But one of the things I learned from growing up, you know, third generation in Port Jefferson, is that my parents were very involved in the church. You know, my dad was a World War II vet. And really what he concentrated on is giving back to society. And I never totally understood it as a kid because we didn't have a lot of money. But we would go down on weekends and help people. You know, my dad would fix their heating or cooling, and he wouldn't charge them, you know, people that he knew needed help. And I would go with him, and I loved going because they always fed me, and I was...
Yeah, I mean, you always hear like Port Jeff's a small town today, and it is. But years ago, we're right around the same age, and Port Jeff was like the center of the North Shore of Suffolk County. You had schools from Wading River all the way towards Three Village and Comstock and Patchogue and almost heading towards those areas that went to school in Port Jeff. So even though it's a small area, it was kind of the center of that spot. And I'm sure you as a smaller guy was flying down those hills, right? Past Infant Jesus and going swimming and like Pirates Cove and all
God.
that, right? And that was an easier time, right, years ago?
Totally. We would skateboard down Main Street, like talking about that. What a different time it was. Now you can't even walk across Main Street, so totally different.
And you'd be skateboarding to people today, doing your LOLs and all that stuff, right? And years ago, you had $5 in your pocket, and you were a king for the day to get ice cream.
You were loving life.
Remember David's Cookies down there?
David's Cookies was down there, Grammis's.
And I remember I wrestled at Comstock, and we wrestled at Port Jeff in that old gym, that wooden gym, and you had the light that you wrestled under. And, you know, so you were a runner-up in the county, which is phenomenal because just the size of Suffolk County, we're this small speck on the map, but we're a large area in America. And just the athletic ability that you see in sports across the board. So you love this sport. And did it take you anywhere after graduating?
Absolutely. You know, I got a scholarship to Ithaca College. And one of the main things I learned, especially from high school wrestling, and we had a coach that was a maniac, Bob Armstrong. And I mean it in a good way, but he had a big, huge display on the wall.
Tough character, right?
Very tough.
Right?
The harder I work, the luckier I get. And I still have that in my office today. And it just teaches you that whatever your dream is, it can become a reality.
You share that with your employees?
I have that all over the place. And we have offices around the country now. And that's one of the first things I say to new people that are hired. And I said, listen, the harder you work, the luckier you're going to get. And that's what I pride myself on. I learned it from athletics.
It's not a farce. It's not insincere.
No, not
This
a
is
farce.
something like you learn how to do single leg takedowns or doubles where it's drilled into you.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing because nothing's given to you in that sport for free.
I love that
right?
analogy you
right?
said, and that's the whole thing. Because to get a single leg takedown, you got to practice it 100,000 times.
Drill.
What's the number? Drill. And it's the same thing in life. You know, if you want to get somewhere, you want to put it number one. You know, I've always thought, and I learned from my dad. You know, what if you have a religion? If you believe God, family, work. You know, and if you have those things, you can do anything you want. Any dream can become a reality.
And watching your dad go to work, right?
Absolutely.
Right? You're running up and down those hills, getting in shape for wrestling. You're riding your bike. You're doing your calisthenics. But you're also out with your father, whether it's 100 degrees or 0 degrees, right? And So that work ethic coupled with the wrestling.
Absolutely. My dad, if someone called at 3 a.m. and said they don't have heat, he was going to their house, without thinking about it, without anything, and not looking what he's going to get out of it. His whole philosophy is, how can I help people get the things they need and want? I'll worry about myself, that'll come, but what can I do to help those? And I think that's the culture that I took when I started King Quality.
And that's what we want to bring to these shows. We're in the Holocaust Museum here. That was a very dark time period, but people still helped out.
Absolutely.
And even though you have a lot of negativity in the museum in terms of what had happened, you also have that other side of the coin where people did help and they risked it all and they, defied some huge odds to help people out. And, that spirit is important through every endeavor because it could only help people. It could only make society better. It could only ensure that certain things don't happen again, right?
Absolutely.
And you're down here, and I guess our main producer or I call maybe my main boss, Bernie Firstpan, who I had interviewed, he has that spirit also. And then I had Jack Brem here, the pararescue jumper who made like 3,000 jumps. He's got that spirit. Joe Cognatori, who you did the roof for.
Amazing.
With VFW Post 6249, he's got that spirit.
Absolutely.
The first guy I interviewed here a number of months ago, Frank Tepedino, who played for the Yankees, the Braves, the Brewers, and he was a 9/11 fireman.
Wow.
And he was one of the few people at Thurman Munson was able to really talk to with the Yankees. To this day, he's got that spirit. So it's a great thing to have you here, and I'm confident that the people, they're going to see you smile and they're going to know that, you're the real thing. You're a businessman who has built up his business through blood, sweat, and tears, but also has given back to society, and we're going to describe that today.
Thank you.
So now you're wrestling. You're in upstate New York. You're away from Long Island. How does the wrestling go for you up at Ithaca?
Do you know, I loved the sport and I loved everything about it. And, we had a great team, Division III. We were one of the top teams in the nation. And I worked really hard. My sophomore year, I hurt my knee on New Year's Eve. And, it was hurt pretty bad. I got operated a couple of days later. And while I was sitting on the mat, I was kind of thinking there's something else for me in life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not that I didn't learn, the sports made me, I think, who I am with the work ethic and the harder you work, the luckier you get.
And that's a tough crossroads for an athlete. Right?
Absolutely. And I really did a lot of thinking, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I dropped out of college, and I came home, and my parents weren't exactly very happy about that, because it was their dream for something.
Yeah, to get an education.
Absolutely. And I wound up moving to Vermont for a little while, and a friend of mine was building condos out there, and I went from being the cleanup guy to the manager to really helping out.
But you had that in the back of your mind, working with your father and kind of understanding certain work tasks and working with your hands.
Absolutely.
And sweating and doing what you need to do.
Without a doubt. And I loved when I went with my dad as a kid, I loved how the people appreciated his coming, and they loved his service and what he did for them, and they also treated me really nice, with food and everything.
What was the slogan that your father had when dealing with customers? Treat them like
family. Treat them like family, and it was always his whole thing. When I would leave, I'd sometimes say, "Oh, how much money did you get?" Because in my head as a kid, I was thinking, "Oh, what can we get?" And he goes, "That's not the important thing." And a lot of times on the weekends, he donated. He was like, "They're our family. Where they're here to help them. We don't have to worry about what we're going to get. We just have to be of service to everybody and have them join the family."
And that's a heck of a way to go. That's a sincere way to go. That's, hey, we're here for this job, whether it goes good or bad for us, we're here to make sure it gets done the proper way. And so now you're a young guy, you're a physical guy, you're kind of going in a different course. How long are you up in Vermont for?
It was a little bit less than a year, but I really learned the whole industry, not just just siding, windows, or roofing, but how to build a house.
That was a little bit of your college right there. Right?
You know what? I never thought about that, but you're 100% right. That was my education. A lot more than I studied in Ithaca, that's for sure. And I think I learned a lot, and I kind of got my calling, what I was meant on this earth to do. And I came back home, and I got a job with a home improvement company, not one I owned, but siding, windows, and roofing. And they sent me out. They said, you're great at talking to people. And I said, I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to sell.
Yeah, you're certainly not a shy guy.
I didn't know I wasn't, though. And I went out, and after a few months, I was the top salesman in the company. And I found out I learned it from my dad. Because I didn't have customers, I had family members, and I'd go to someone's house and I'd find out where they were married, and not that I was trained to do that. I just talking because I really do like people, and I wanted to help them make their dreams come true.
Sure.
What's your dream for your house? How can we help? And that brought me so much success at the company. And finally, in 1992, I opened up my own company, King Quality.
What was your proudest thing? Because like Jeff Bezos with Amazon, all they ever wanted was like a forklift to help with some of the packages, and he was driving everything to the post office himself. That was like a big thing for his company, right? I mean, we drove by Amazon on the Long Island Expressway coming here today, and it's massive, right?
It's huge.
And that's just one spot.
That's one spot.
What was your biggest thing early on that you kind of look back and say, wow, this was like a huge achievement at that time?
Do you know, I think 1996, we're still only a few years old. One of the manufacturers brought me to their place, to a little seminar, and they said, Jeff, we really wanted you to talk about to other contractors how you have so much success so early. And we did a lot of financing too to help.
You're a young guy. What are you,
I was a young guy.
26, 27 years old?
A young kid, exactly. Yeah. And everybody started calling me the kid. It was top 500 remodeler, and people would call me the kid. And, now I'm old, but it's different. But I couldn't believe that they had that respect for me at that age, because I still thought in my mind, I'm just learning this industry. I'm trying to get better. And I was so amazed that they did that. And, I met this guy, Dave Yoho, who was like, wow, you're a natural. You're going to have some... And he really set the fire on the stage, and he goes, you got to try to build one of the greatest companies in the country.
You know what that is? That's like your old wrestling coach seeing something in you that you're not quite sure about.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like you see something in someone else. Sometimes they don't always see it. But you like, hey, do this move, do this, do that. You'll have success with this.
You're absolutely, that was the analogy.
And if you look at your business, home improvement on Long Island, blue collar, middle class, hardworking people.
Absolutely.
Right? Those are all formulas, I would believe, for success, right?
Absolutely.
And one thing about Long Islanders, they don't like a bad product, okay? Or they don't want any of that.
Definitely
And they don't want any nonsense,
Definitely not.
Right? So, and you kind of learned that early on, I would think, right?
That was a great analogy, because I actually didn't think about it till you just said that. Yeah. But it's absolutely, we opened up in Ronkonkoma as a small company, and I said, I don't have the best company in Ronkonkoma. Yeah. And then as it kept on growing, the same thing, like you said, from the wrestling coach, what are you best at, and what is the things? And that inspired me to really
And you got to start somewhere. Right?
Absolutely.
Bill Gates has this thing, and you've probably seen it. And I show it to my students, the seniors in economics. It's like the 10 things that Bill Gates says, right? And one of them is like, and you'll like this, your parents had a life before they had kids, what I'm saying? Wow. And then the second thing is flipping hamburgers was not beneath anybody.
Nope.
It was called a start. It was called dignity. It was, it was work. And you started from the ground up.
Yep.
And, it's one of those things where you can go and look at a job and know what somebody up on a ladder is doing, or
absolutely
bringing the supplies, or somebody who's selling the job. And it calculates in your mind, right? So now you're in Ronkonkoma. How long are you in Ronkonkoma for?
We started there in 1992, and we moved up in offices. Now we're in Bohemia. But in 1992, we started in a small, I don't even know, like 1,500 square foot office or something like that. And it just kept on growing. It kept on growing, and it's
What was
amazing.
one of the reasons why it grew?
I think the biggest reason why it grew is exactly what you said before about the wrestling. Do it to you the best, And one of the mottos we always had is the best is yet to come. That was always something I said. And worse first. Worse first. The hardest stuff comes first. You might have a dip down, the economy, whatever it is, but that's the time that makes you who you are. Just like in sports,
Sure,
it makes you who you are, or in a battle, in war, how you come through that, the Battle of the Bulge. I mean, you learn that history. You battle through those things, and you get peace of mind that no matter what it is.
And it's all a learning process, too.
It's all a learning process.
Yeah.
And that was even better. I'm glad you said that. You can make mistakes, and they're going to happen, and that's the worst. But you just don't do the same mistake twice. That's what my lawyer would always say. He goes, I know, Jeff, you only 2 years of college. Did you get a master's in business? I said, no. And he goes, well, this is your master's in business. Don't do that again. This is what you got to do. This is how you got to run it. And you learn like that, and it makes you keep on getting better every day.
Okay. So now you go from, let's say it's 2000 or 2001, 2, 3, somewhere there, and you're well established now. How many jobs a day did you guys do? And after a couple of years, you got your feet under you, you're moving, you got the place in Ronkonkoma.
Yep. That's when, really, 1997, 98, 2000s really started booming. And we were probably doing about 20 jobs a day, at that point. And it blew me away, really. By 2001 and 2002, I was actually like almost stepping back thinking, I can't believe this happened, and really looking at...
Yeah, it's blown up in a positive way.
In a positive way, and so many people, people don't talk about their parents all the time. And I think about my mom and dad, and a lot of people would call us up for work and they would say, hey, Jimmy Hankey, I've known your parents forever.
Guy.
And they wouldn't ask the price. They would say, hey, I know your parents. I trust you when you're doing the work. And in such a crazy way, and it was a different time.
What were some of the jobs early on that you do?
Do you know, you all siding windows and roofing, and mostly residential. So not really too, we did a lot of churches, and, we just did a big art thing, Ward Melville Society. We just did the place George Washington went to, the spy place down in Stony Brook, and I think it's a 200-something-year-old place, and
Amazing.
the spies were in there, and we did the roof on it. And that was awesome. It was just a great feeling.
Like you had Talmadge and Woodhull up there, and Adam Strong. Yeah, a lot of history. Yeah.
Right down by the Woodmill, right down by the park.
And you, when you're driving, because like I drove a truck for a long time, like I know exactly where the Holocaust Museum is here, because I did deliveries on the same road, going to Teddy Roosevelt. I deliver a ping pong table at the base of the Teddy Roosevelt mansion, so you pick up on that history. But you're driving, and then you're figuring, this is what happened here.
Absolutely.
Right? So a lot of Long Island and a lot of this area, and also the history too. I mean, just look what you said. Revolutionary War. We did a job there, and you're looking around. It's amazing. So now, let's fast forward it. I don't know, 25 years now today. How many jobs are you guys doing, and where are you guys located?
So we're in Bohemia still is our main office, but we have Syracuse, we have Westchester, and we've partnered up with companies around the country now. So we're in Florida, Tennessee, Detroit, Cleveland, Ohio. Off the top of my head, I know there's more than that, but we're trying to we're going to be all 50 states we want to be in. And it's incredible the amount of people, I was just in Georgia. We have a big company there. I was there 2 days ago. And it's amazing, what we're building. And I'm so blessed to be a part of that. But it really all starts from what you said earlier is wrestling. The harder I work, the luckier I get. And my thing now, I'm 60 years old and I feel a little bit older. And I have a new goal now. And my goal is in how can I change the lives of my employees? How can I help their dreams come true? What can I do, and how can I help all the people I meet? And that's become my main thing. Besides King Quality Cares and being of service, but how can I help people make their dreams come true?
And you have to have goals, right?
Absolutely.
The goals don't come to an end. They change a little bit, right? So
and
keep you motivated as well.
Like the Navy, if you're a ship, and it's funny because most people that I meet and I talk to, they have a dream, but they don't really understand what their dream is. And really, just like a ship leaving the harbor, if aircraft carrier's got to go to wherever, they're going to have a captain and they're going to have directions.
Yeah, support.
Your life's the same way.
Yeah.
If you make a 5-year plan, this is what I try to tell people, make a 5-year plan, then go 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. It's not going to be a straight line. It never is. It's going to be worse first, but you're going to get back to where it is. But if you know where you're going, it is absolutely impossible not to get there.
Sure.
And that's really the secret.
You might have some bumps and bruises along the way, but
you're going to have a lot of bumps and bruises along the way.
Some potholes.
You're going to get to where your dream is. And it really is. And I know now I'm older and I look back on my life. It really, and I know people don't say this all the time, there was a lot of hard work, but it's simple to get there. You don't have to be a genius, and I can prove that because I'm definitely not a genius. But if you know where you want to be, it is absolutely impossible not to get there as long as you put in the work that you need to do. And when you do have the worst,
sure,
what's coming next is the best.
Heck, Jeff, you're making me want to run through this wall right now for you.
You do, baby.
But all right, so now you're a patriotic guy.
Absolutely.
You're a blue collar, all-American kid flying down the hills of Port Jeff, right? You're hanging out by the railroad station there. You're getting ice cream. You're wrestling. You're running, right? So now, and you've said it a couple of times just in the last 20 minutes, right? In terms of service and your own family, he might as well be, another uncle for you, Jimmy Hankey.
Jimmy Hankey.
So
best.
Can you identify some of your own family experiences like in uniform? Because this is going to come full circle in the interview probably within the next episode. But service is close to your heart, though.
Everything.
Right?
They made the country. Without them, we have nothing. And originally, my grandfather, who I never actually met, he died. He was World War I, but my father would always talk about him. And he was in World War I. He got mustard gassed. And I know this is a little bit of a crazy story, but he got mustard gassed and he went to Port Jeff High School, which was a hospital at the time. And my grandmother, they didn't know each other, but they lived 2 blocks away in Brooklyn. She came with the USO and she was a piano. And
probably brought in by the Long Island Railroad.
Exactly,
right
by
there,
the railroad right there. And she sings to him. They start talking, they meet, they fall in love. They find out they live a block away, but they fall in love with Port Jefferson. And he helped out with the fire department.
Sure.
And what I learned from
Small town America?
Small town America. He would help out a lot of the VFWs from World War I to get jobs and everything else. And that's the way my dad thought. Like, how can I serve? And when World War II happened, his older brother went first, Eddie Brett. And then my dad followed, and my dad went to the Navy. And my Uncle John went to Korea. He was a little younger. And those guys made it. They were proud to serve. They were proud to help this country. And
you saw that with your own neighbors and people in Port Jeff, the fire department.
Fire department.
You had Lawrence Aviation that was over there, right?
Right down the road.
Just kind of like Grumman.
Yep.
Right? How many of those guys served at one time or another, right?
So many of them was on. It was such a different time, and it really shaped their lives. And Lawrence Aviation was actually right up the road from my house, So we knew them and the people in town. So proud to have a flag. And we always had a flag in front of my house, and my dad would always talk about not that he had to go to the Navy, that he wanted to go and serve, and it was such a different thing. And just talking now about that, I think that's what started my service and wanting to do it, by just my dad having that kind of thing. How can I serve?
And hearing those stories. And
absolutely.
When I was younger, my uncles with my grandfather, they were business guys. And it was kind of like Mad Men a little bit, like they're successful guys and they're watching golf at the holiday parties and this and that. And it always got back to the war.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
You hear that enough, you know the importance of doing something that's larger than yourself, And like I said, Long Island's a speck on the map, but I mean, the amount of stories and history that's here from the Revolutionary War, or a job that you just did,
absolutely,
to everything going on today. they might say, you know, they might not mention the war on terror that much, but it's still there in terms of security and everything, you know. So, so now when you look at King Quality, is it one of your goals to kind of do veterans-related programs?
Absolutely. Do you know, it's something, you know, we just did one in Port Washington too, some windows we
Yeah, right
donated.
around the corner from here.
Yep.
Right?
And really, it's the guys that did the most for this country. I mean, you're risking your lives. And there's lots of great people that have made American help.
And they don't say much about it too.
I feel like it's, when I was growing up, the veterans were everything, you know, and to my dad, you know, I think about when you were talking about that earlier, I was thinking about the amount of war movies I watched with my dad was just incredible. And the way history was taught, you know, we had a guy, Mr. Olson, that just, he used to always say to me, he goes, Jeff, you're going to be an officer. You're going to go to the Army, you know, and it was that kind of thing. It was a little bit different, and we appreciated him. I feel right now we have to get back into that. And I want King Quality Cares to be a part of what can we do? How can we help the people that help build this country?
Now, we're going to come back with Mr. Jeff Brett here from King Quality, and we're going to talk about those feelings that Jeff had about his company, about service, and giving back not only to this area, but to other areas around this nation.